There is a big fight at the beginning of HBO's The Gilded Age. Season 2, Episode 1. The Opera Wars. Bertha, I don't like opera in 1883. Russell has reached the top of New York society, but she still wants more. In particular, she wants that In Search of an Opera Box. Bertha is told what an opera box is by her loving husband George, the Robert Baron, who says that she doesn't even like opera. It's more of a doorway. Social chances, rather than a seed for. And Performance Ba also wants to use her money and power to help build the Metropolitan Opera House a rival theater, but she can't. To get a box at the Academy of Music Opera House, which is what the old guard likes. There will be an account of how the Metropolitan Opera became famous in Season 2 of Gilded Age. As a big force in modern society, it's an interesting story, and the new money matrons who were upset that the Academy patron wouldn't include them actually started it. So many people know about the meeting and the story. Opera fans say that Bob Shaw, the production designer for the show I interviewed for about 5 years ago, asked Julian Fellowes about it in his first job interview. Fellowes is the author of The Gilded Age. As I recall, I asked, "Are you interested in the opera wars?" And I think that was one of the things that made me seem like the right person for the job. Shaw recently spoke at an online press conference for Season 2 of The Guild. He said that the robber barons of the 19th century shook New York society to its core. The Gilded Age shows that until the Industrial Revolution created a new class of mega-rich people with last names like Carnegie, Vanderbilt, and Rockefeller, the wealthiest families in American high society were made up of a mix of families who had been in the country before the American Revolution. One place was still open to the possibility of them being left out. The Academy of Music opened in 1854 at the corner of Irving Place and East 14th Street. It was meant to replace the recently closed Astor Opera House and become a meeting place for New Yorkers who were among the wealthiest in the upper 10,000 before the new money came in. It was still what the top class ate. Culture. And they even had a party for the Prince of Wales in 1860. There was no room at the Academy for families with new money because the private boxes were already taken by families who had invested in the theater from the beginning to pay for a new one big enough for the Morgan and Vanderbilt families who were dying to have their own opera. Lists of boxes. The Metropolitan Opera Association was set up on October 22, 1880. The first Metropolitan Opera House, also called the Old Meeting, opened in 1883 at 1411 Broadway, between 39th and 40th Streets. The show that featured Swedish soprano Christine Nelson, and the role of Marguerite was a performance of American novelist Edith Wharton, mentions the opera wars, and the fact that Nelson, a superstar at the moment, had done the identical role at the Academy only a few years earlier at the start of the Age of Innocence. The Old Men was dubbed the Yellow Brick Brewery because to its unimpressive industrial facade. But it quickly gained enormous popularity, which sped up the Academy of Music to the Academy decided to end its opera season in 1886, and by 1888 vaudeville shows had taken over the facility after a fire nearly destroyed the old Met. In 1892 modifications were made to bring it back to its original layout. The 1900s saw more substantial renovations and improvements after the present Metropolitan Opera House at Lincoln Center opened its doors in 1967, the old Met was finally demolished. The extent to which the Gilded Age creator Julian Fellowes adheres to this history will have to wait until you see the entire season. Nevertheless, it appears from the start of the Gilded Age Season 2 that HBO is sticking fairly closely to the historical account. Alva Vandero was a huge fan of the Metropolitan Opera, and it's clear from her made-up replacement, Bertha Russell, that she wants to win the opera war by taking on Esther Caroline, Bera's enemy. She was one of the best fighters in the school, which makes it even more interesting. Kristen and Nelson's performance, as Margarita in the second season of The Gilded Age, has already been teased. This means that HBO's The Gilded Age has correctly shown history, except that Bera Russell is directing the action instead of a real-life Gilded Age character. Rosa Vanderbilt,